SpaceXplr. This is episode 71, as you see here in the corner. Today we have a very special guest, not far from me, actually, here living in Scotland, a little bit up north. So today's guest is Helena Cochrane. She's 16-year-old astrophotographer from Scotland, as I said. So she's officially started deep space work in April 2020, but always had a huge interest in the moon and space. So she began the hobby, started to realize how challenging it was. So we're going to be talking about a lot of these challenges and how we can overcome them. So in the hope of being a help to others at the same time, she decided to set up a YouTube channel, which you should go and check it out. It's called Helena's Astrophotography. Huge channel, a great channel, a lot of insights for you who are looking to get started in astrophotography. Do encourage a lot of ladies to get involved with that. She's part of, I'm sure, some groups with ladies involved in astrophotography. We're going to be talking about that. Facebook, Instagram, Helena's .astro, that Instagram and Facebook, Helena Astrophotographer. I think included. All the links are going to be in the show notes, so don't worry, everything's going to be there. Make sure to get in contact with Helena and ask the questions if I missed something on the show about astrophotography and how to get started. So Helena, again, thanks again for joining me today on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, thank you. It's my pleasure to get connected because again, we connected through the people that we kind of know on the social media. So these people are. I mean, the community is great for the first. If you're coming to this type of interview for the first time and you think about how do you get involved, if you just have these conversations on Instagram or social media, these people are super friendly, really approachable, and they can help you a lot when it comes to getting started. But talking about your own personal kind of journey, so can you tell, where are you coming from? I mean, how did you discover the astrophotography? Was there some sort of a person or event that kind of influenced you to follow the path? How did it all start for you?
So from the age of about 7, I always had a general interest in space. So it might have been before 7, but I did a primary school project. So when I was about 8, I think, on space. And the theme of the project was life on other planets. And I did my project. I was so happy with it. I cut and pasted some pictures in a scrapbook of aliens, and I was so fascinated by it. And I wanted to find life on these other planets. And I found it fascinating that it was even like a possibility, because I hadn't even considered it before. So I asked for my first telescope when I was 10, I think for my 10th birthday. And it was a little Celestron first scope. So it's on one of those little circular bases that you just sit on your windowsill. And I started looking at the moon, I started looking at the craters, and I was fascinated by the detail and how much I could see from like such a distance away. Didn't even know it was possible at that young, when I was that young in age. And from there, I live in quite a rural area, and we have a few festivals that we host each year. And we have this one, and it's called Big Bang Weekend, and it's actually coming up quite soon. And unfortunately, this year it's obviously online, but every year we have authors and astrophysicists and scientists that come to our festival or Big Bang Weekend. And I got to speak to them and have an insight into what they were doing. And I just became more and more interested by talking to these interesting people. And I ended up applying for a program here in the UK. It's called CBBC Engineers. And I applied for an observatory den to be built in my back garden. Now, this is now where I house all of my equipment. And I started filming in there. And from there, I started my YouTube channel because I realized I wanted to inspire others to get into the hobby. That's really where it sparked from. It is quite a long story.
No, it's good. Like I love the stories. I don't know about you guys and girls, but I do love the stories because I think there's a lot of lessons in those stories as well, what to do, what not to do, and I'm sure there's more to that, in that story particularly. But what would you say again for the beginners and the people who are watching and they've probably seen a few interviews about astrophotography, still not convinced, and they don't know if they should get started. Like, what would you say to those people?
So obviously, astrophotography is quite. Once you're in the hobby, I'll say you're in it for life. So What I would say is if you're unsure about how you want to get started, or even if you want to get started, buy a smaller visual telescope. And this way you can learn your way around the night sky before you start photographing it, because observational astronomy and astrophotography are two very different things. And even if you are going to start astrophotography, I think it's really important you learn your way around the sky first. This way you can already learn some deep sky objects. You can even see them through a little, maybe a Dobsonian or a Celestron first scope, like I suggested earlier. And this way you can see if you're actually properly interested and you want to go further.
Hmm. Again, so going further, so let's say for somebody, if because again, I told you before, kind of before we started recording, I had more than a few people talking about astrophotography, and
Mhm.
everybody gives their own kind of perspective on when it comes to buying an equipment. So let's say if somebody made that decision, and not looking at how much money and what the budget is, like what personally would you recommend when it comes to buying those equipment pieces, like where people should focus on, what are the kind of the most important pieces, and maybe any particular brands that you would like to kind of stand out from the rest.
Yeah, definitely. So for beginners just going in, I always recommend a star tracker. A star tracker or an equatorial mount. So an equatorial mount and a star tracker, the difference between them is a star tracker is basically smaller and an equatorial mount's larger. So when you're thinking about portability and wanting to have that motivation to get out under the sky, I always suggest something small and easy to carry around, because that way you're not going to worry about having to set it up as much. So a little star tracker, I always go back to the Skywatcher Star Adventurer Pro. The Pro pack comes with everything you need to get started. It's literally a smaller version of, say, the Skywatcher HEQ5 mount, which is really popular amongst some of the leading astrophotographers now. And the EQ6R Pro is the one that I have, but a little star tracker like the Skywatcher Star Adventurer. And then to go on top of that, I always recommend a wide field scope or a telephoto camera lens, because if you've already got camera equipment, say you've already got DSLRs and telephoto lenses, you can use those for astrophotography. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of that. So you can stick this on your star tracker and you're all set. You can shoot the wide field nebulae in Cygnus. You can shoot the Cygnus complex, the Eastern and Western Veil complex. The opportunities are endless. You could shoot the whole Orion constellation. Heck, you could even shoot the Horsehead Nebula and the Orion Nebula together in one shot.
Well,
And the reason I recommend wider focal length scopes and wider scopes is because they're more forgiving in tracking. And tracking is one thing that really bugs people down and gets people down when they're starting this hobby, because it's such a difficult thing to get right first time. And when it's wider, it's more forgiving in tracking. So if you've got a little bit of a higher error than you should have, it won't matter because the wider field will compensate for that. So the general advice I give is use what you have already, because I think a lot of people don't realize what they have and how far it can go, really.
And now we kind of start to understand how far we can go. I mean, these objects that you mentioned, we are talking about, like probably if people are going to go to your Instagram, they're going to see some work. I don't know if you have included some work where you just did,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, with the star tracker and camera just. But there
Mm-hmm.
are, many Instagram channels where you can go and see the type of work that you can achieve with this type of equipment. But the question is, when you're looking to update and let's say buy a telescope on existing mounts, like any particular brands there, maybe you can give a little bit of what you're currently using and maybe what you would recommend for the beginners also.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm quite loyal to Skywatcher. I haven't really gone out with Skywatcher right now, and I can't fault them at all. They are such a high quality company that produce what it says on the tin, and it does what it says on the tin. So I'm currently using, so an upgrade from, say, the HEQ5 that I was talking about earlier. An upgrade from that might be the EQ6R Pro.
Hmm.
And the benefit of this is the tracking is of a higher accuracy, and it's also got a higher payload capacity. So if you've got a bigger telescope, bigger camera, maybe you're shooting mono and you have a filter wheel and that back end's really heavy, this is going to compensate for that, and you're going to be able to have a really high payload on the mount. As for the telescope, I'm currently using mostly a Skywatcher ATED. They're really great. They're an all-rounder, so I can do a little bit of wide field if I stick a reducer on it, or I can get the full Orion in it, so full Orion Nebula, full Horsehead, so really nice detail. But I'm also working on a project for those who want to go more advanced and don't know what to get. I'm currently working on getting the Esprit 120 up and running. So it's a much larger focal telescope. So to give you an idea, my 80 was 510 with the reducer, and the Esprit 120 is 840. So it's a big jump, and guiding has to be more accurate for that. And that's why I say always go back to wide field if you're struggling with your focal length and guiding at the minute. But anything in the Esprit range, they do a really nice Esprit 80. Trevor Jones from Astro Backyard uses the Esprit 100. Fantastic scope, he can't fault it. And I'm using the Esprit 120. And so far, it's looking really nice, and the triplet optics are really paying off. So yeah.
So does that mean that the bigger is better, or the small equipment still can do a pretty decent job as well?
Well, it depends what you want to focus on. I've
Yeah.
seen some images that are taken untracked, and I've seen some of them, and I've seen them come up on Instagram, and I'm thinking that they've been taken with something like an HEQ5, but it's been a camera on a tripod, no star tracker, and thousands of 3-second exposures. And to pack in this large exposure time, so it is possible without big pieces of equipment. And I think that's the message I do want to get across, even though I am using bigger pieces of equipment right now because I'm finding what niche I want to go into within the hobby. But I've seen, for example, so I've seen some untracked that I thought was tracked. I've seen some color images that I thought were mono. So there's really no telling how far you can go.
And how do you personally get inspired? As I mentioned, finding kind of your own niche. Like, what will be your advice for beginners when it comes to shooting the objects? Because there are so many different, objects. And again, if you want to choose the planetary, you want to choose the sun or nebula or anything else that you want to pick. So how do you about making that decision? And maybe you can give a few more people that you kind of follow yourself. You mentioned Trevor Jones, which is a
Yeah.
great inspiration for a lot of people. So how do you like go about making the decision, and who do you follow personally yourself?
So when I started, the first person I saw was Trevor Jones from Astro Backyard, Galactic Hunter, so Antoine and Dahlia, Chuck's Astrophotography, Ray's Astrophotography, all of these people on YouTube, Rosine from Astrophotography, and Stace from Astro Stace, Tim from Astro Addict, all of these people were, and more, were my inspirations. They were the first people I saw when I started YouTube and astrophotography. And now I've found a lot more connections on YouTube. But the way I sort of chose a target was I would look up, like, let's photograph the Orion Nebula if I wanted to photograph Orion. And that'd pop up, and all of these guys that I followed would have videos on it. And seeing them going out, getting their setup out, posting the image on Instagram, and I would follow their process, it just inspired me so much. I was like, I could do that, and I want to be able to do that. And as for finding the targets, I like to use a program called Stellarium, and it's a free software, and it's absolutely super for finding field of view. So you can punch in your camera sensor size and your telescope focal length, and it's going to give you a little rectangle or a square on the screen, and it's going to show you the required field of view to get a certain target. So when you're, say, I've got my Esprit and it's a really tight field of view, I can find out what I can get. So in Orion, I'd be missing out the Running Man Nebula in Orion if I was using the Esprit. But with my 80, I can get both. And I found that through Stellarium and watching others on YouTube.
Beautiful. So again, part of that, following other people, you can become one of those people that a lot of people would follow you. Like in your case, 7,000, I think, plus subscribers and counting. So again, congratulations on that, becoming an inspiration to other people at the same time. Just continue to pass on that kind of flame to other people and igniting them with that fire. So that's beautiful. So again, with currently what you have with the equipment, I mean, what would you say is kind of the most important piece when it comes to handling that equipment? I mean, any issues that you currently had and could be a potential struggle for the beginners when it comes to handling that equipment?
So one thing that I struggled with, I live in Bortle two skies, so I don't have a lot of light pollution.
Mhm.
But when the moon's out, and I also live next to a row of street lamps, so I'm in Bortle too. But on the left side of my garden is a row of street lamps, so it doesn't exactly feel like Bortle too. And I really struggled with gradients when I was taking photos. I was getting these streaks across my images when I was stretching them, and I was like, what is causing this? I was getting so frustrated. And astrophotography is so difficult. And when you get that one thing, that's enough for you to just be like, right, I'm finished. I don't want to do this anymore. So I'd really encourage you, if you live in like polluted skies or if you want to shoot when the full moon is out, because it is possible, although some people don't realize that it is. You can shoot through multi-band pass filters. So I'm currently using the L Enhance filter, and it is really, really great for combating light pollution. However, I've noticed a lot of other people are using the L Extreme. This is from Optilong, by the way. So Optilong L Enhance, Optilong L Extreme. And the L Extreme, the difference between the two is the L Extreme is better at cutting out the O3 lines, which is where moonglow comes in, so oxygen 3, and it means you're not going to get as big a moon gradient and the nebula is going to be pushed forward. However, if you're on a budget, I would suggest the L Enhance, and if you're in, say, Bortle 2 to 3, L Enhance works a treat for me. But that is one thing that I found when I started. I was like, what's going on? So don't worry about gradients. You maybe just need a UV IR cut filter, or you maybe just need a light pollution filter, and that'll get it sorted for you.
Got it, got it. So the couple of questions about the equipment, because again, during these times, very interesting times, right? So again, some people might find the equipment could be a little bit pricey if you're going to buy that brand new. So what will be your advice, buying secondhand or buying brand new, like pro
Yeah.
versus con in that? And how did you go about your personal equipment? Did you bought it brand new, secondhand? Or what's your think the best way to go about that?
So I bought a lot of my equipment new, but I buy my DSLRs secondhand. The one thing you need to worry about there is the sensors, because sensors can get easily scratched and damaged, and that can just wreck it for you. That happened with my Canon 1100D, which I unfortunately had to leave, and then carry on with a 60D, which hasn't done me wrong as of yet. But that's one thing you need to worry about. But in astrophotography, we're so passionate about our equipment. A lot of people do take, like the majority of people, take such good care of it, and they really take their time to clean up their equipment. And if they're selling, I think it's really important to make sure that they're being as transparent as possible with you when they're selling. Platforms, Cloudy Night, Stargazers Lounge, dependent on if you're in the UK or America, or in other places around the world, they're really good and trustworthy places to go to look for secondhand equipment. As for like my Canon DSLRs, I bought them off a website called MPB or MBP. Might have to correct myself on that. And it's a really trustworthy website, and I know Astrostace from Stace from Astrostace has used it before, and that's how I got into using that. And I love it because they give such a detailed description of the condition it's in, and I always go for either very good or excellent, because again, the sensors, or if you're buying lenses, it's really important that they are in prime condition, or if it says as new or like new, but there might still be like £100 off it because it's still been used. That's a game changer. Go for those ones. Just be careful of the sensors.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So thanks for that.
No problem.
Another question is again you talked about
Mhm.
being in Bortle 2, which as you said sometimes it feels like it's probably Bortle 5 or 6 because of the street lamps that you have.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, including myself, who do live in cities when it's very like
Mhm.
high light pollution, we're talking about Bortle 7, 8, 9, could be
Mhm.
up to that. So besides having the filters, talking about post-processing, like, is it possible to solve that problem again through stacking images and then post-processing? And like, what will be the software that you personally use, and what would you recommend for the beginners to use, and how difficult it is to do this entire post-processing?
So post-processing, it's almost as important, if not as important, as image acquisition. So it is really important to get it right and use the correct software. However, you can go down different routes to be able to get like cheaper software. So I use Deep Sky Stacker for stacking,
Mhm.
which is free. And for those who don't know, in astrophotography, you must stack your images to get a higher signal to noise ratio. This is to combat any noise in your images and basically get that higher signal. So get more photons in that bucket, if you see what I mean. So I use Deep Sky Stacker for stacking. Then when I started, I used something like GIMP. Again, it's free. Although it doesn't have the levels function that Photoshop does, and that's where I was really tripping up. So there's things like GIMP, which I do recommend for beginners. And then GIMP has really transferable skills that you can then go into Photoshop, because it is a very similar user interface. It's not exactly the same, but there are skills you can transfer over. So I then went to Photoshop and I now use PixInsight. Now, PixInsight is a very daunting software for beginners. And I wouldn't, if when I started astrophotography and looked at PixInsight, it would have completely put me off the processing process. However, if you are very smart and much smarter than me, I mean, I was a little bit silly, so it might just have been me, to be fair. But if you do have the brains for it, by all means, PixInsight turns a 6-step process into, say, a 1 or a 2-step process. It's really easy. As for removing light pollution, you are going to have to use filters for that primarily. But what I love about PixInsight or Photoshop is you can get gradient exterminators. So in Photoshop, there's a plugin called Gradient Exterminator, and in PixInsight, you can just use the inbuilt DBE, dynamic background extraction, and you can use something like this to eliminate most of the gradients. However, I would recommend taking flat frames when you're doing your calibration frames. If you're not sure what calibration frames is, for those who are watching, it's basically you take them and you subtract them in your stacking software, and it basically makes a map of all the nasty things on the sensor. If there's hot pixels or dust, and it subtracts them. So in this case, flat frame subtracts dust from the sensor. And that is a really good way to get rid of gradients. There's loads of astrophotographers that don't post their images without having taken flat frames. I don't take flat frames as often as I should, which I shouldn't really be saying. But so that's when you go to a filter or, say, Gradient Exterminator or PixInsight.
Got it. So for a lot of people that get probably confused into all this kind of words, like what does the half the stuff that you're saying here, what does the Helena saying here? Like I don't know what that means. Like, is there a way for people to go about and learn, let's say, all the terminology? How did you go about to learn all the words? And I mean, what does these phrases mean? I mean, was it the kind of slow process, or you just follow people and kind of go and search this word out, and what does it mean, and how does the work again with equipment wise, and how do you go about this entire learning process?
So I learned from the beginning, but I learned slowly and step by step. So I would learn, say, some terminology for the setup process, and I'd leave that for a week and I'd figure that out by watching a YouTube video of someone setting up, and maybe they'd put in some little call outs on the screen, they'd show
Mhm.
what it meant. I'd look up a definition in forums. Cloudy Nights, again, I swear by them. Cloudy Nights and Stargazers Lounge, really great. Even if the thread hasn't started, you can post and people will answer you. It's such an active community. Again, YouTube videos, Instagram, in their specifications, a lot of people, including myself, put what they've used, why they've used it, and how it helped. So you can use that. But post-processing tutorials are where you're going to learn the most from post-processing terminology, because I do appreciate some of the things I'm saying sound like garbage, and not many people will be that don't do astrophotography already will be able to understand what they mean. And certainly 2 years ago, I would have thought you're speaking a foreign language to me. So I do appreciate that. So forums, YouTube videos, Instagram specifications, start a thread in a forum. That's really how I got around the problem.
Got it. So again, you starting and being on this journey for now, again, for all this time, like, what would you say again for the beginner self as you started in the beginning, like on the things of what to do or what not to do? Like, what type of advice would you give?
So, especially when you're beginning, you don't know how far you want to go into the hobby. So, I always go back to small pieces of equipment that you can then build up to larger pieces of equipment. And I think that's a really easy way. So, if you find out, do you know what, this is not for me, you can go and you can sell your equipment on cloudy nights. And you can go and you can sell that on to someone who wants to continue with the hobby. So I think starting small and working your way up slowly is the main thing, and use the most out of what you already have. I think that is so important because it can save you so much money. The one thing that I swear by also is don't stop asking questions. I'm a question freak. I'll ask so many questions to so many people, and it's the only way to learn from the more
Hmm.
experienced, because all of the people I mentioned earlier, Rosine, Stace, Trevor, Tim, all of these people on YouTube, I would DM on Instagram, and they've been so responsive. I wouldn't be where I am today without them answering my questions. And it's asking, not being afraid to ask, really, is another thing I'd say.
Exactly, super important. And knowing how to ask effective questions and
Mm,
knowing, first of all, because the question is the problem, it's not the answer. You're
mm,
going to get the answer, it's knowing what to
yeah.
ask. And would you recommend for people to get, and do you have personally some sort of a mentor or one person that you can call or text anytime, or it's multiple people in one time?
It's multiple people. It's all of these. It's the astrophotography community. It's
Mm,
such a tight community, and everyone gets on so well. And it's creating these Instagram groups. So I'm in a young women's astrophotography group. I'm in a youth astrophotography group, and you can really just chip in any questions at any point, and ask, and people will reply with their experiences. And again, all of these YouTubers that I've mentioned, there's not really one specific person. They've all been absolutely fantastic in helping me along the way.
beautiful, beautiful. So can you talk about a little bit, again, you became part of the some leading telescope retailers, as it says here, OPT and High Point Scientific. So can you talk about how do you make that connection? I mean, how did it happen for you and what type of benefits or encouragement, because it says that you achieved some support with them as well. So can you talk about that journey with those companies as well?
So when I first started Instagram, one of the first companies that I found was OPT, and their customer service is absolutely insane. They're so great. And I was asking them some questions about equipment problems that I was having. They were instantly getting back, and through that, I was making, although I didn't know at the time, I was making connections, and I was starting to get in touch with the individual people from OPT. So they were following me on Instagram, and we were having really interesting discussions about what they were doing in astrophotography and what I was wanting to do. And they've sort of seen me grow on the platform. And I've done a couple of things with OPT. I did a takeover on their Instagram. So they allowed me really kindly to post some of my images for a day, which helped me tremendously. They're so kind when it comes to that. And they're sharing the community's photos on their Facebook and their Instagram, and they're sharing beginners' work as well.
Mm,
And it's a really big encouragement. That was the same with Highpointscientific. I did a takeover on Highpointscientific for a day, and they've done like what's in the night sky posts and featured some of the youth astrophotographers, which was really lovely. But OPT, especially, I did a women in astronomy video with them, and I was one of the 17 women lucky enough to take part in that video. And it was just so great to make so many connections, even outside of OPT, because not all of them were involved in OPT. And yeah, so that really took off from there.
Beautiful, beautiful. So being part of that, I mean, if you're gonna stick around for a little bit,
Hmm.
as majority people do, again, if you're
Hmm.
just gonna become part of the network, just like
Hmm.
Helena did, like the networks that you're talking about, then
Hmm.
you can find these groups on Facebook, Cloudy Nights, again, Instagram groups. There's a lot happening if you just start kind of digging in. You can uncover a lot of those people, and those people will support you and won't
They will.
let you quit probably, but most of the time they will be keep going, and of course
No.
they can answer all these difficult questions on the problems that you're probably going to bump into, and they
Yeah.
already kind of went through all these problems. They figured things out because they had those same problems, and they're going to help you a lot. So talking about your personal work, as I mentioned, it gets features on OPT. I'm sure it got featured on other platforms, on the Instagram accounts. So what would you consider is your kind of best work so far that you achieved, and what will be kind of the future projects that you're looking forward to?
My favorite photo that I live in Scotland, so it's really hard to do astrophotography because it's so cloudy all the time. So getting a long integration on a target is a real achievement. So I'll see my friends in America; they'll be getting 10 hours. I'll be like, I went out last night and got 1.5. I was really pleased with that. But that's a lot for me and my weather. So, my favorite photo that I've taken so far. See, I'm really bad because I'll look at my photos and I'll only see the
Mhm.
things that I have
Yeah.
to improve on. I won't see the good in them at all. I'd probably say my Pleiades M45 was a really nice target. It was taken on a low moon night, so I wasn't shooting through a filter, and I couldn't shoot through my L enhance because it actually blocks the emission from it. You'd have to use something like the L Pro. This is all Optolong, by the way. So if you just Google Optolong L Pro, it'll come up. But I don't have that filter, so I was working with my Bortle 2 Sky, but the target was on the other side of my garden, so it wasn't with the 6 streetlights facing me. So I got all that natural emission, and that was really important to making that photo look how it turned out. I think that's probably my favorite project that I've done so far. And as for the future, I do want to do more wide field. And I do want to go back to my DSLR because I'm now using a cooled ZW ASI 294. And I do appreciate that most of my viewers have DSLRs, and I want to be producing that content for them that they can relate to.
Mhm.
So, at the same time as shooting with cooled cameras, I do want to go back to that wide field setup, which I really do enjoy.
Got it, got it. So, yeah, so that's good. I mean, you're giving people an easy access to astrophotography, so you don't have to buy in a lot of equipment. As I mentioned, you can
Mhm.
start with just DSLR. Again, as you mentioned, the post processing, and depending on what you're
Mm.
going to use, there could be a little bit of a learning curve
Mhm.
there. But I'm sure you're leading people, and a lot of people following you that, and there's a lot of great advice and great work that comes out from all of this work that you do, and by helping people to improve and grow. So, talking about what is happening overall, as I mentioned before, I would like to ask you just for a personal kind of opinion and thought, what is happening, just in the industry, as a space industry
Mhm.
overall. Again, I do love the fact that when I hear for somebody just like yourself that the stock shelves for the astrophotography equipment is getting low or it's missing. You're calling, let's say, OPT or a big company, and they're saying we don't have that piece. We're
Mm.
waiting for that piece, and it could be because of the manufacturing issues, because what's happening with the COVID,
Mhm.
it takes it could be a problem where when the
Yep.
manufacturing shipping, or it could be because so many people are getting into astrophotography, which makes me excited at the same time. So, how do you look at the entire market and what's happening again with the SpaceX Blue Origin? We're looking to fly to the moon. First lady on the moon, by the way, with the Artemis
Mhm.
mission. It's going to be really exciting to see that. Traveling to Mars. What do you think is happening right now with the space industry? Are you excited? Are you looking particular to any projects in the future as well?
So I'm really interested in what's going on right now, and I think it's really important as well that all of these things are going to be happening within our generation and the younger generation. And I think it's really important that younger people now that are maybe, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 about now, that are getting into astrophotography through their teens and are seeing these things happen they grow up knowing that there's the International Space Station orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes. They grow up knowing that's just a part of their life. And knowing that there's, maybe a moon launch tomorrow. And I think that's so exciting. And I think that also brings another opportunity for people careers wise, because the space industry is so vast. And whether you're staying on the ground and you're doing engineering or you're going to the moon, I think it's really important that people are aware of how important it is. And like, it is a door open to us possibly finding out where we originated from. And I think that's really exciting. As I said, going back to my school project when I was doing my school project in primary school, I think that's really a really important factor, that we could be finding out other origins of life in space. So yeah.
Exactly. So the times are very good. Like it makes me very exciting because look, for the audience, if you guys and girls are watching in space or space exploration, astrophotography, looking at the objects that are, billions of light years in diameter, which we don't have anything like that size and scale again on the planet. If that stuff doesn't excite you, we have a big problem,
Yeah.
So it has to be an exciting, and I think it is exciting, just like the picture that you're commenting before, lunar gateway,
Yeah.
lunar station that's going to be built up, and it's part of the Artemis project to make supplies, for the moon
Yeah.
base and things like that. So a lot of these projects are coming up, and it's getting really exciting. It feels like the momentum is growing. So part of that momentum, I would like to ask you a question. A lot of the research, I think you probably heard about SETI before, where a lot of the kind of doing research for extraterrestrial, part. So do you believe personally, or maybe you seen something through the telescope that could be extraterrestrial? Do you think there's something out there?
Well, see, my opinion on it is there's so much out there, and there's so many galaxies which contain so many solar systems, and there's billions of stars, which each contain their own solar system around them. And the way I look at it is, I think it's impossible that there's not something within those, whether we find it or not. And I'd love to say that we do. And I would like to be here when it happens. Whether that's the case, I'm really not sure. It depends on the advancement of technology that's going on right now. But it's looking good, certainly, and especially stuff with SpaceX, that Elon's doing with missions to Mars in the future, which are looking really hopeful. And I think, yeah, so I want to say, yeah, no, I think it's impossible that there can't be something out there, whether it is on Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, or whether it's out with our solar system. I don't know. What was it? One of Jupiter's moons, Europa, I think, is full of ice. It's like an icy body, and underneath is water. So I was like, well, something has to be living in that. There has to be a microorganism. So I think it's really exciting, the projects that are coming up and the probes that are going out. I do think there is something out there, though. That's my opinion. I do, though. I do.
Exactly. And there's so many different theories, and most of it is just the theories. And again, we
Yeah.
probably can talk about, kind of extraterrestrial and UFOs, being here on the planet, because there's so many different stories, and, everybody has their own personal perspective and thoughts. But that's what it is. There's no many facts available, and people are saying, the government is kind of releasing more and more information about, oh, this happened. We discovered the craft. It's not from this planet and things like that. So basically, they're trying to get used to us to the fact that there's something out there, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just media trying to get some attention. Again, we don't know. We're gonna see everything is gonna be unveiled and uncovered in the future with part of those space projects, as I mentioned, probing planets. So what would you say again for the ladies? Because I love the fact that a lot of ladies, I mean, you mentioned a few names that I had on the podcast as well. And I love the passion and the enthusiasm the ladies, put out. Sometimes even more passion and enthusiasm than the guys. So I think there's a lot of, advice that people should take from the girls. So what would you say to get more women to get encouraged to be part of the astrophotography ranks also?
Well, I think when you're a girl and you're looking to start astrophotography, you immediately notice that there's not a lot in the hobby. There's not a lot of people that you can look up to for representation, for a role model, for being like, oh, I can do that. I'm a girl, I'm 16. I can be like that girl who's also 16, 17, 18, whatever. And I think it's really important that more women do get into it, so that we can like increase the amount that are in it, because that's going to increase the number of role models that
Yep.
these girls have, and they can be like, I can do that too. And I think a lot of, I remember in primary school, one of my friends wanted to, this is what really spiked it for me, and I was like 8, and one of my friends was like, I really want to be a doctor, but I can't. And I was like, why? And she was like, because I'm a girl. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, a doctor is a male's job. That's strictly to do with males. And I was like, this needs to stop. So like there's so many guys that I look up to in this hobby. Like without them, I could not be where I am today. But I think it's important to have that balance, so equally both genders have representation. And through Stella, which was founded by Diana and Sarah, it's absolutely changed my life, to be honest. Stella stands for Striving to Engage Ladies in Astrophotography. And it's
Beautiful.
this which women can come to, and it's sort of as a space where we can talk about space and astrophotography, and we meet almost every week and we just have a nerd out, and it's like people like yourselves, and it makes you feel normal. And it's a really weird thing to say, but engaging with people like yourself is a really, really important thing. And I definitely found that when I was starting the hobby. And there's now younger ones coming into Stella that are starting as well. And I think that's really important to get the younger female generation into the hobby as well, that they're going to grow up knowing, oh, it's okay, I can become a doctor, I can become an astrophotographer, because I could, like, females can do that too. That's allowed, because it absolutely is. And I think it was that thing when I was 8, when that my best friend said that to me. I was like, what? So of course you can be a doctor. So that's why I started YouTube, because I was like, this is important. I'm a young woman in astrophotography, and I want to tell other young women that they can do it too, because I'm doing it as well.
Exactly, exactly. So I think, and I love that part about you because you're looking to inspire other women, which again, like, look, for me, it doesn't matter. Like, if women, a guy,
Mhm.
if you're a creature of some sort, and for me, it doesn't matter. I'm not gendering anybody. Look, do you
Mm.
have a passion for that or not? You don't have it?
Yeah.
Look through the scope and get the passion
Mm.
in you, because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who. And again, the fact probably that you talk with your, again, being 8 years old, having that
Mm.
conversation, and she said that it's a man's job, it kind of inspired you and it got you to kind of follow
Yeah.
this path. So it's really great because I see a lot of girls becoming part of the astrophotography groups.
There are more
And
and more. Like I started in
yep.
2 years ago, and I didn't see a lot. To be fair, I wasn't on Instagram though at that point. I've been on Instagram for a year now, almost a year, and I'm seeing more and more, and it's really exciting. And I think it's because I'm part of Stella, I'm seeing all of the people that are coming in, because as many as we can find, we invite them into the group. And the group's constantly growing. I mean, we had to change chatting platforms because the chat didn't hold the amount of people that we have, which I thought was great. I was like, yeah, this is a technical problem, but I think this is fab.
This is a good problem to have. So how many members do you currently have, and how ladies can be part of the Stellar group?
I think there's about 50. They're probably watching now and being like, Helena, you got that digit wrong. There's way more. Around about 50. There is a lot. And the way, if you're a female in astrophotography and you would like to join Stella, give Diana, myself, or Sarah a message. Definitely Diana and Sarah, because they are the founders of Stella, and without them, none of this would have been possible. And they're on Instagram. Diana is Vanilla Moon 22, and Sarah is astro.sez, S-E-Z. And just get in contact with them, and we can have a chat over Zoom with you about how you'd like to contribute to Stella. It'd be great to see you. It'd be great to have you along. We have weekly meetings where we just chat about astrophotography, or just vent about the week we've had, or some of us bring each other outside when we're imaging, which is really exciting. And obviously, when COVID's finished, we have plans to do meetups and events. I think what holds for Stella in the future is really exciting. So don't hesitate to give us a message if you're sitting watching this and you would like to be involved. because it would be our pleasure to have you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, great cause, great message. Building
Yeah.
the community of like-minded, ladies is great because again, and it's going to become even better. I love the fact that you're looking to create this kind of meetup, and because it's different when you can meet people, face to face, and just enjoy and have a great time, and do a little bit of astrophotography at the same time, and just become friends because it's a journey. It is a journey. It's because some people think it's very, it's all about kind of maybe science based, and that's what you're going to be talking about all the time is just astrophotography. Look, people are people, they're bringing
Yeah.
them perspectives. You can talk about life, whatever talk about, any type of thing. So, it's very probably casual conversation that you can have at the same time. It's not going to be all about astrophotography as well if you don't want to do that.
Yeah,
But
and you can also come and go because, like,
yeah,
right now I'm in my busiest term at school. Yes, it's online, but it's the busiest time for me. And like, I come and go, I miss meetings, I come back, I'm like, sorry, I was in an exam. And they're fine with that. They're chill because life is life, and we talk
yeah,
about it. Like, we don't just talk about astrophotography, and we're a support group. And it's really weird because it feels like I've met them in real life, but I haven't met any of them. The closest one, who's such an inspiration to me, is Danielle, who lives in Cork. And she's closest to me, and we really want to meet up very soon. She works in an observatory in Ireland, and we had a conversation on Instagram the other day. We were like, can you move here near me? We were like, yeah, we'll move the castle. She works in an observatory castle. We're like, we'll move the castle to me. It can't be that heavy. But I think it's really important to make those connections with people like yourself. And it does feel like I've met them all in real life. It feels like we've been to a star party together. And I think it's just going to make meeting face to face even more special. I'm definitely going to film it, definitely going to put it on YouTube.
yeah. Here you go. Here you go. So you guys going to be continuing on the journey here with Helena as well on YouTube, at least for the ones who are not living in Scotland or somewhere here in Ireland that you can meet up with her. But look, everything is going to be possible because again, the ranks, more people I'm sure are going to join, Stellar, and again be part of the group, and you can do, you can travel to Spain at some point in the future and make a kind of, meet up, over there. Everything is possible. I just want people to understand, who are running these things that we can do so much more as people. It's not only about taking the photos. We can impact people here because I think
Yeah.
it's a very important piece. I always talk about that instead of having this Earth-like thinking where we focus on about things and the way we look like, and it's I need the shoes, the fancy watch, or the car, the house, all of these things we do need. We do have some joy. We do get some joy from that. But having more of this universal thinking.
Yep.
And that shift is happening. So again, and that's why I love the fact what you guys are working on, especially you with astrophotography, because you help people to start to get this universal thinking, which is very important again for this and for the future generation to understand and to think about space. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that walking outside these walls that we're sitting, they're walking around and they're not even thinking about space.
They're
Never.
not even looking up. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So it's very important what your girls are working on, and yourself as well. So again, what would you say, for the audience and for yourself, like what will be your and maybe again it's a little bit too early to ask you because you're still 16 and maybe too early to ask in a cycle, just in a lifetime where you are. But what would you like to kind of leave as a footprint or a legacy, after like all of this work that you did?
I want to leave the message, two messages. One, asking questions, and two, you can, no matter who you are, you can be who you want to be, whatever you want to be, where you want to be, and how you want to be it. And you can be that person. Like, you can sit and imagine being that person, but you can be that person. You can make it happen. Like, the world is your oyster. And I definitely want to leave that message behind. And I hope that I am starting to. It's definitely a big passion of mine to be able to do that and say to people, listen, if you're male, female, it doesn't matter. You go for that dream that you have in your head. If you're like, I want to go to the moon, follow that, do it, because you can. It's
Yeah.
possible. People have been to the moon, people are going back. Say there's a 10-year-old sitting saying, I want to go to Mars. Do you know what? They probably could, because by the time they're in their 20s, Mars missions will be taking off. So everything's possible. And I just think that's such an important message to get out to people. especially right now, because I feel like with everyone isolated and locked down, the world's shut down, nothing's happening. No star parties are happening, no one's going outside. I mean, except astrophotographers, because we don't have to socialize in our hobby, which is great. But I would like to go to a star party and image with other people at some point, and I think it's important to know that the world will open up again and things are going to start to happen again. And it's looking positive. Like now, seeing the news, it's looking quite good. And I think it's really difficult to see the light in the tunnel right now, and difficult to be like, yeah, I want to go to that observatory in Chile, or I want to go to Spain, and I want to go to all these places. And you can, the world is going to open up very soon, hopefully. Don't swear by that on me, please.
It will definitely, because you
Yeah.
have to. Things will come back to normal, and But I think, as you mentioned, the kind of the good side of this, us staying at home, including myself, is you have the time to think about things and kind of come back to the things that were important, because you're talking about the kid who is 10 years old or 9 years old, and they talk about getting involved or are involved in astrophotography. The problem with that is, once these kids start to grow up, once they become 16, 17, 18, and they start to feel a little bit more of these kind of responsibilities of going to job, or paying the bills and doing things like that as the adults do, right? It's they forget about their passions, because when you ask the kid, let's say he or she is 5, what do you want to be? An astronaut, fireman, or a
Yeah.
nurse, or a doctor, anything like that. But when people grow up, it's like, oh, forget, that's the kids only talk that way, right? So we
Yeah.
should think about that and come back to that point of we were kids, because I want to ignite for you guys and girls the curiosity, because that's where this entire game is at. You have to become curious again,
Yeah.
and question everything. What's happening out there? Is there something out there? Is there life in there? How do I start this astrophotography? And you become, this kind of going into this rabbit hole just deeper and deeper. And whatever time you have, 1 minute a day, 10 minutes a day, but make the time for the
Yeah, do it.
astrophotography and just exploring the space in general, because it's very important. It's the future is here, so make sure to do that.
Couldn't agree more.
Exactly. So, Helena, again, really appreciate you coming on today. Again, always welcome to come back, because, again, I
Love
love the
to.
fact, yes, please do, because look, I know there's so much more that we can add on to this conversation.
Oh
As
yeah.
I mentioned, just how much time we have available currently right now. But, it is so much more is available, and I can feel we can extract a little bit more, give more advice to the ladies as well, how to get involved, into buying the pieces, and maybe there's some specifics that we can go in in a future conversation. But again, really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. Again, love the fact what you guys are working on with the Stellar, that you're looking to get impact. More of the ladies that they will get involved with astrophotography, and is just like I'm a fan. Like, continue to do the work
Thank
that you do.
you.
It's very important. So thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, thank you. So, guys and girls, in particular, one thing that I want to ask you, if you like this episode, make sure to get in contact with Helena. Of course, as I mentioned, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook is going to be included in the show notes. Another thing I want to ask you, if you pass this episode along, not just because I need the views, you need to pass this episode, because we need more people to get involved with astrophotography. It's a simple reason, because more people need to see this episode, and more ladies need to see that. Get in contact so they can get in contact with Helena, be part of the Stellar group, and join the ranks of astrophotography, because it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to do. So again, guys and girls, thank you for watching this episode. And as always, I'll see you next time. And until then, don't forget to keep exploring.